is about Odin. Odin's been reaching out to me, which is kind of interesting. For any of you who remember, when I first started reaching out to Freya, I did try to reach out to Odin, but he wouldn't work with me at all. I used to like light a candle for him. I bought this really beautiful blue stormy candle for him, and I would light it, and every time I would light it, it would go out. Basically, I got the impression that Odin was like, nah. And so I was just like, okay. It's been like 4 years since then, and maybe a month ago, Odin started reaching out to me. So yeah, let's get into that. I think the number one thing that kind of intrigued me and started kind of being something that I started noticing, or something that's more noticeable, was recently the, oh god, what is it called? The Assassin's Creed game, Valhalla, I believe that's the name of it, came out. And I was intrigued because I work with Freya, right? My boyfriend was playing it, I was sitting on the couch, and basically that's that. I mean, I was just enjoying watching him play the game a lot, and they do show Odin in there quite a few times, although I remember when I was watching the first reveal of like Odin, I was like, that's not how I see him. I mean, they didn't really get Freya how I expected her either, but you know, I was seeing him in the game. I don't really relate to him as a deity outside of that at all. And then one night I had a dream, and then also sort of a feeling within myself. I had a dream that I was in my backyard with somebody, probably my boyfriend. Anyways, we're sitting there and there is a tree in the backyard that I've never seen there in real life. Like, that tree in real life does not exist. But in my dream, for whatever reason, it exists. So this tree's just kind of chilling out there. There's a mad thunderstorm happening in my dream. It's like going wild, lightning all across the sky. You hear the thunder, etc. It's getting a little dicey in there. But there's no rain actually happening. It's just like that before kind of vibe. From then on, lightning ends up striking this tree, and you'd expect, like, it like broke the mid part of it, I guess. So you'd expect the tree to fall over, like, boop, down. That's not what happened. So lightning strikes the tree, and in my dream, this tree literally goes boop. The top part of the tree literally lands straight down, and you can still see like the leaves and everything. So it's standing straight up on the trunk part of it. The stump's over here, I guess. So this tree is now two halves. From the top half of the tree, all of these wolves start racing towards me in the dream, and they're like coming from me. They look like blood hungry or whatever. I'm kind of terrified, like, oh god, no. And then I wake up. So I wake up from this dream. When I woke up, I like heard the name Odin, and that's how it worked with Freya. Whenever I did a meditation with her, I just heard her say her name over and over to me again. With this time, it was just Odin once, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go back to sleep though, because it's early in the morning and I don't want to deal with this right now, because I already dealt with that with Freya. Like, Freya just kept saying her name, she wouldn't leave me alone, and I was like, no, let's not do that. So I started to try and go back to sleep, and what ended up happening is I heard noise or like music or talking in the living room, and my mind is telling me that's the TV, right? Like, that's probably the TV. Obviously, I know the TV's off. Like, I know both me and my boyfriend turned it off before we went to bed. There's no way that TV's on. Like, I don't even see the light from it underneath my door or anything. In my head at this point, I'm like, this is Odin. He wants me to go to the TV for some reason. Like, he's telling me, he's trying to get me to understand there's a sound over there, that's where I need you to go. And I'm tired. I don't want to do it. Eventually, I just get irritated because the noise keeps going off, and I'm like, oh my god, okay. So I go to the living room, I turn on YouTube, and I, you know, get another message in my head. Like, I just hear it out of nowhere kind of thing. It just happens. Clairaudience, okay? Like, that's my thing. And it was like, type in Odin patron, or like, my deity Odin, or something like that. So I type this in, I find a video from a girl. She starts talking about her experience with Odin. And there's one thing specifically that she said to me that really stood out, that made me be like, okay, here we go. And she said that she had a similar situation to me, where it was like, She tried to work with him, and then he didn't want to work with her. And then, like, however many years later, he came back, and she started working with Odin. And that rung to me because I was like, that's the exact same thing that happened to me. He didn't want to work with me when I tried to, and then now all of a sudden he's here. And so what this whole situation was teaching me or telling me is that Odin is finally, like, chill to work with me now. Like, I don't know if I changed or what happened, but now he's vibing. Like, he's rearing and ready to teach me whatever. So now I'm thinking, let's go further along or further ahead. It must have been like a couple of days to a week, but I didn't have anything back from Odin. Odin didn't reach out to me. I was just there kind of chill, like, okay, like, you'll come to me when you want to talk to me. And then it kind of started being a thing of he wants me to reach out to him at some point, or I was just like, I want to figure out what you want from me, I guess. So I decided to sit down in meditation for a little bit, which I did. And I remember specifically every time I tried to sit down to do either a guided kind of thing or like meet your spirit guides or whatever, or just even music, I tried to sit down and I really tried to visualize talking to him or what he wanted. And every time I would sit down and try to do something or like try to meditate, try to kind of visualize, something in my room would make a noise. And I remember hearing at one point, again, in my noggin, but I remember him saying something like, if you're too distracted by small things, obviously you need to work on your meditation, kind of vibe. Basically telling me I was not focused enough. Patience, you need to have patience, and you need to have focus. You've got neither. And I was like, correct, sir, I just want to figure out what the hell you want, kind of thing. But Odin is kind of a guy that's like very slow, meticulous, thought out kind of thing. From there, I ended up, I think I had a live with one of my friends, Leanne, also known as Health Key Rain the Woke Witch, and I was telling her about all of this, and I remember talking about it. I was talking about the patience kind of essence and how, to me, and this is such a big, this is important, I don't know why it is, but it's an important thing here. I was talking to her about how I thought that Odin was trying to teach me a lesson about patience. I was talking about how it corresponds to me with fairies, and how did I relate it to being? The idea behind it is that with fairies, there's a patience to it as well. There's a different kind of patience, but it's more about the laugh or the joke. So like, let's say fairies around you are hide your keys from you or something like that, but you don't notice it right away. Usually, like, the way I feel about this is they don't reveal things to you until it like amounts to the best payoff or the best joke, so that way the laughter is better at the end. They steal your keys but you don't notice it, and then they show you small signs like or they like put something in your way so you realize you need your keys, and then you know, the payoff of the joke is funnier, like, haha, you can't find your keys, you know, whatever. So that trickster kind of energy, it amounts to a bigger payoff in the end with that patience. But with Odin, the patience is about that big payoff too, but not about a joke. It's more about the lesson payoff. He gives you small pieces of things in small amounts of time, so that way the payoff for the lesson is of bigger meaning. And he really enjoys that, and I don't know why. I respect it, but it's still interesting and something I'm working through. Where this is leading to is I finally did meet and talk with Odin in meditation and visualization, whatever you want to call it. I waited a different day to do it. I really was focusing on meditating, and then finally I reached through to him. And I don't know why I didn't expect him to be like this, but he is a big boy. Like, he is like giant, okay? Like really tall and like a boulder, basically. Like, that's what I just saw him as. And he has, like, of course, the gray beard that's long and like that whole thing. And I also saw him with a blue hat, or like some sort of hat, like you know, that traveling hat he sometimes has in his stories or whatever. I don't know if that's an actual thing or if I'm connecting that to Od from Freya, her lover, who I think is secretly Odin. But anyways, in my meditation visualization, he had a blue hat, and he had like a jacket over him, or like a over blanket shawl kind of thing, and it was torn to shit, but he was still carrying it around. I don't know, he's kind of quiet, few of words, he doesn't talk very often, but when he does, there's usually a reason behind it. And like I said, I think it just has to do with that payoff towards the end.
My work with Odin, I am a very big Odin guy. I've worked, many times trying to connect with Odin, and it's very tough. Odin is a very, very tough cookie to catch. He's very elusive. He'll be there one moment for, a good amount of time, and then all of a sudden he's gone. You don't see him again for 6, 7, 8 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years. That's the way Odin is. That's the way he's come to me. He's come to me in meditation, and he's come to me in dreams. And not very many times. I've been working with Odin for over 3 years now. And Odin has literally came to me maybe 3 to 4 times, if that. And that's not even, it's more like he comes now, and then gone for a while. Then he's back for a day or two. And then he's gone for a while, even longer. So that is what I think is great about Odin. I think Odin is on the recruiting trail right now. And I think many people that are becoming Norse pagan, that are following this path now, have been recruited by Odin, because many of them are saying, Odin has come to me, or I've felt Odin, I've seen Odin in a dream, something like that. But that concludes my video on Odin. If you guys want to know anything more, let me know.
In my experience, Odin is not really down with the kind of like ethnic purity and all of that weird shit that, some of these people think are important, and that's because Odin doesn't give 2 fucks about things that don't matter. And to him, physical form does not matter. He is not at all interested in anybody's gender or race or ethnicity or ability, anything like that. It's all totally arbitrary stuff to him. So, now that that's out of the way, let's talk about who Odin is. Odin is very much a multifaceted being. One of my favorite things about Odin is that you never really know how he's going to appear to you. Just off the top of my head, I have seen him as a dog, a deer monster, basically Gandalf, some kind of like Lovecraftian abomination. It's very fun and exciting, because Odin likes to kind of keep you on your toes. He likes to keep things spicy, and I love that about him. But like I said, he's very multifaceted. He is kind of an outcast. He fucks around with the idea of gender. He's like a keeper of hidden knowledge. He's a poet. He's the wanderer. He's so many different things, and he has so many names to reflect all of those facets of his being. I only got interested in Odin when I was 20 years old. I'd been dabbling in witchcraft and spirit work for about a year at that point, and I just happened to connect with a handful of people who worked with him. And I'd never really felt particularly drawn to Odin before. I kind of tried to get in touch with him, but he never really responded. It didn't feel like he was very receptive to my contact at that time, and so I just kind of forgot about it. The following year was when I got to know Anubis. And like I mentioned in the Anubis video, if you haven't watched it, please do. Like I mentioned in that video, Anubis was the first deity that I started working with, and shortly after that, I want to say maybe might have been only like 3 months after I started working with Anubis. No, it was like 4 months, 4 or 5 months. After I started working with Anubis, I started getting this feeling like there was someone else who was trying to get my attention. I started seeing crows all the time, which isn't that weird because we do have a decent sized crow population where I live. But I was having experiences with them that just seemed significant. Like, I would have them, like, perched outside my window, like, looking in and, like, cawing at me. Which I personally have not had a lot of experiences with birds doing that kind of thing. And it just felt like, you know, I was being called to. And then I started seeing ravens, which was weird because we don't have a ton of ravens where I live. And the first time I saw one, I was like, what the fuck is that thing? Because a lot of people don't know this, but ravens are actually big boys, and they make this really unique sound. There's really no mistaking a raven for a crow or blackbird of any kind. They're weird guys, and they're beautiful and lovely, and they are associated a lot with Odin, as well as crows. And also, Odin was just kind of on my mind a lot at that time. And so, you know, I finally accepted, you know, I think Odin is trying to get my attention. So, you know, one night I just sat down and I was like, okay, whoever's trying to reach out to me, come on in. Let me know what you want from me. And he came through, and the rest is history, my friends. That's really how I got involved with him. It's not that exciting, not really like, you know, how I got involved with Anubis. Anyway, Odin's beef with me was that I was a very fearful person when he came into my life. I still am a little bit, but not nearly to the extent that I used to be. I used to have a lot of issues with, like, social anxiety and self-esteem and that kind of thing. I was always afraid to do anything that would get me noticed. So, like, I never talked in class when I was in school. I hated any kind of public speaking. The very concept of a job interview was horrifying to me. It was not easy, like, being so fearful of that kind of thing. It's honestly kind of debilitating sometimes. And his thing was like, you know, you have to overcome these fears that you have, because if you don't, you're never gonna be able to, you know, reach your potential. You're never gonna be able to do the thing that you've been put here on this earth to do. And, you know, back then, I never imagined that I would ever be able to do anything like what I'm doing right now. Because, like I said, just the thought of, like, other people knowing that I existed and potentially saying things about me was absolutely terrifying. So I never would have been able to, like, have a YouTube channel ever. But Odin, he was just not having that. You know, he was like, you have so much to do in this life. You gotta overcome this. And so it was a long, slow process. But with Odin's help, I was able to start doing things that used to scare the shit out of me. And I've made a lot of progress in the couple of years since then. And then, you know, this past fall, he was like, okay, sis, it's time. I said in my other video that Anubis was a big part of why I started doing this. But Odin actually encouraged me to start this channel and start doing readings for people, like, more than anyone else. So, yeah, there's that. Odin is a really weird guy, if I'm honest. He's definitely not for everyone. You know, just in contrast to Anubis, who is very beginner friendly. And who will work with just about anybody. Odin, on the other hand, does have this like trickster god aspect, and he's known that way for a reason. He's definitely got his own agenda. His morals are pretty gray sometimes, to put it simply. He is someone who I think overall does care about human beings and, you know, helping us to ascend to a higher level of consciousness and reach our full potential and, you know, realize that we are divine in nature. So, like, overall, he does care a lot about humanity and people. But he's a little bit more selective than someone like Anubis, for example. I'm just talking about Anubis because Anubis is the deity that I work with most. Anubis and Odin I work with most. And it's fun to compare and contrast them because they are so similar in some ways, but also so very different. All of that said, Odin does not care about things like race or gender or sexuality, anything like that. Those things are not going to have any impact on whether or not he's going to be willing to work with you. It's really just a matter of, to be honest, I don't know. I don't know how he chooses who he does and doesn't work with. I have no idea. I honestly think that he kind of chooses people sometimes based on a person's willingness to, you know, work towards improvement and work towards realizing their potential. Like, I personally feel like he's not going to be super interested in working with someone who is, you know, afraid of branching out, who is not going to be willing to put work towards helping themselves and helping others along the way. He does, at least in my experience, tend to favor certain groups of people, such as the poor, the disabled, LGBT folks, pretty much any kind of like marginalized group he's down with. He associates himself a lot with people who exist kind of on the fringes of society, if you know what I mean. So, you know, I've already mentioned this, but Odin is not for everyone. He's not going to be open to working with everyone who reaches out to him. And if he's not interested, there's a good possibility that he's just not going to do anything. You're not going to get anything from him, not even a crumb of acknowledgement. Because, like I said at the start of the video, you know, the first time that I tried to sort of connect with him, I got absolutely nothing. And what I had to do basically was just wait for him to come to me. So, if you were to reach out to him, I really don't know how often he responds to people who contact him first. I don't know. If that's something you've done, let me know how it went for you. I'd be interested to hear. If you choose to reach out to Odin, you do need to be careful of that trickster god aspect of his personality. He might acknowledge someone simply because he feels like they would be useful to him. And once they fulfill whatever it is that he wants them to do, you know, he can be kind of an asshole, okay? And so some people do have very unpleasant experiences with Odin. And some people are very averse to, you know, ever doing any kind of work with him or contacting him in any way, or associating with him in any way because they've had negative experiences or because they know people who have negative experiences. And I totally respect that. I know he's an asshole sometimes. I think he does sometimes take issue with other deities that a person might be working with, and that can influence whether or not he's going to be nice to you, unfortunately. I used to know someone who worked very closely with Loki and who had a really bad experience with Odin, and they attributed that negative experience to the fact that they were so involved with Loki. And I don't know if that was really the reason, but that's what they chalked it up to. And so, all of that said, if you do decide to reach out to Odin, I advise being careful. He takes oaths very seriously, so don't make him any promises that you're not going to be able to keep. But for all of his kind of asshole-ish qualities, he can also be very, very gentle and empathetic and kind. You know, I've said this like a million times now, but he is so multifaceted. There are so many different aspects to who he is, and it's kind of wild sometimes, the contrast between, you know, certain parts of his being. Like sometimes he can be really straightforward, very harsh, just sort of tell you like it is, no sugarcoating, no nothing, just like the ugly truth. And then other times, like I said, he can be very gentle and loving and, you know, a real source of comfort when you need it. And it just really depends, I think, on what approach he feels is going to get through to you most at any given time. Because even though he is super weird and super complicated, I think that he does care about his devotees.
First, I'm going to talk about how I started working with Odin and what kind of happened with that. It started with a dream, which is interesting because most of the deities that I have worked with have usually started with some sort of dream. Freya's the only one that actually didn't come to me in a dream. I just suddenly was very, very drawn to her. And so I started researching her and reading about her, and I just needed to absorb everything, and I actually ended up buying a statue of her shortly after. But Odin was interesting because, excuse me, I had a dream. I think I had mentioned this on my channel previously, but I had a dream where I was in this huge library. Like, think if you've ever seen the movie Beauty and the Beast, which I can't imagine a person who hasn't, because it's an amazing movie. Here I go, Disney nerd again right now. The library that the Beast brings her to. I remember even as a kid, I was like, holy crap, I want that library. I had a dream where I was pretty much in a library very similar to this. And I was standing by a very large window with this massive tree outside of it. And a friend of, well, he was more of an acquaintance, was sitting at the table. There was kind of books scattered all over this really big table. And he starts talking about how Odin is the god of knowledge, which is interesting because this acquaintance of mine is a pretty diehard avid atheist. And I thought that was strange, but I just remember agreeing with him and then turning to the window and looking out upon this massive tree and kind of quietly saying Allfather to myself. And then I woke up from the dream and I was like, okay, yeah. It's usually when stuff like that happens and I wake up, I'm like, yep, okay. I actually really, that's another video topic that's probably going to come out sometime within the next few weeks here. It's just dreams and the spiritual messages that I get through dreams and kind of that topic. But so yeah, that's what started the whole thing with Odin, and it was kind of interesting. And the strange thing about Odin and how I work with him is he kind of has this ever-going presence, I suppose. Just kind of always there with this soft guidance. It's interesting. There are times of the year that I feel more strongly connected to him, and it starts right around Samhain, and then it goes all the way till Ostara, and then I don't work with him as heavily as we go into spring and then summer. So it's just strange. That's just how it works for me. But on winter solstice, I honor Odin. Back on Odin himself and why I work with him specifically, I personally believe that Odin came to me as that guiding spirit, as that wise old fatherly figure, in a sense, which I never really thought that I would have that kind of connection with a deity. I was a little bit uncomfortable with the idea, and that's for many different reasons. So I'm actually very pleased at the fact that when this started to occur, I didn't resist it, and it felt very natural. So it's interesting how deities, or even other things in our spiritual practice, get introduced, I think, right when we need them in a lot of ways. And Odin was definitely that for me. He was something that I needed to, there were certain aspects of Odin that I needed to face, or maybe have more presence of in my life. And I think that we, at least in the case of me, that tends to happen with deity, Freya specifically. I work with her, and the things that working with Freya has taught me is to love myself most of all, but also to genuinely love others, to genuinely be good to others, and to project that kind of love, and to really understand love and its many levels on way different concepts than I ever really fully understood until I started working with her more heavily. But Freya also brings out that warrior goddess aspect of me, as well as I deal with my inner demons. So this is why I work with her on a more regular basis versus Odin, who, like I said, takes that more observing standpoint, that kind of continual
Next,
guidance.
I would like to tell you a little bit about what working with Odin is like, because maybe some of you are interested in working with Odin. Of course, I can only tell you about my personal experience and maybe a little bit about the experiences that other people have made with him that I talked to. But of course, everybody's experience will be slightly different. So my experience and also other people's experiences have shown that Odin pops up rather unexpectedly in people's lives. So he will just randomly pop up and be like, hey, we need to talk. As a deity, he's really straight to the point, and he will have you do lots of work for him. That's for sure. Everything that I have been doing for Odin up until this point were pretty big things. I mean, as I already said, self-sacrifice is a big thing about Odin, and he will have you sacrifice also some things. At least a lot of your time. But Odin uses his followers for the greater good, so you won't just work because it feels like it. Also, he's not really a deity that is present like all the time. He will pop up here and there and tell you what to do, kind of course in a nice way, but he will just pop up from time to time and tell you something that you need to do, and then he will be gone again. And that completely makes sense. He's just not a deity that stays in one place all the time. He's a wanderer. He wanders all the world, so of course he can't be there by your side always. But although he's not like always there holding my hand, he still feels to me personally like a father figure, so that makes working with him really beautiful. Also, if you do stuff for him, he will help you. For example, I created this YouTube channel for Odin because he told me to. He told me to like spread the world and teach people about stuff. So I created this YouTube channel for him. Like my whole online presence is basically for Odin, and he's helping me with it. So he helps me gain a little bit more of a following here and there, and he doesn't really just leave you alone with the work. And one thing that's kind of for sure, if you start working with Odin, he will have you learn about the rules properly, which isn't always fun. It took me quite a lot of time and quite a lot of books to get through to, yeah, learn about runes until he's satisfied. But I would personally say if you are also a person that's on the lookout for knowledge and wisdom, then working with Odin is perfect, because it's like living with a really wise elderly person, but also at the same time a pretty serious teacher. That's, for me, what working with Odin feels like.